long story short, I guess somewhere around 2010, I started calling myself an artist, and I started participating in the art scene, and that community became vital for me. And I'm a big promoter of Las Vegas, what Las Vegas is, what Las Vegas isn't, and the art scene and the artists of Las Vegas, whom I love and cherish dearly, even though they're all quite a pain in the ass.
Yeah. I mean, artists are artists.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can't get around that one.
Yeah, you said something about narcissism earlier.
Well,
I'm just saying that is an underlying current of like, and then the idea of control over how you come across. It's like sometimes I have people come on the podcast. I'm like, oh, you totally don't understand the medium.
Exactly.
Welcome to What's My Thesis. I'm Javier Proenza, and today my guest is Brent Holmes. You're in Vegas, correct?
I am in the fabulous city of Las Vegas. It is the only city consistently labeled as fabulous, which we're all very excited about here.
Cool. Well, I mean, I usually start asking people a little bit about their background in art when they got started and get a little bit of that context. But I'm definitely curious about Vegas as an art scene, because I know a lot of people from California that were in the art scene have ended up buying houses out there.
Really? Tell me.
Is there not a huge community out there?
Our community is small, growing to mid-size, and pretty intense. We have a really intensely dedicated community. But I mean, I'm part of the older guard. I'm part of like the people that came along in 2010 and really galvanized the art scene. And the thing about Las Vegas, when you talk about the arts in the city, is that we've had a lot of ups and downs. You know, the city gave us kind of an arts district. Everybody flocked there. Then there was like a moment where they were like, oh, we're going to build a stadium down there, so everybody sell your property. And then that didn't happen, and they built the stadium all the way across town years and years later. No relation to that statement. And then people kind of flooded back in. But now where the arts district really is like a, kind of yuppie-ish upscale dining or mid-scale dining, gastro pub, bar scene thing, and there's like a couple of exhibition spaces down there, but then the rest of it's really like spread around. So we have, and the people that are in the arts, like really truly in the arts, I mean, that's maybe 1,000, 2,000 people that are really dedicated to the arts, which is a small number for most cities. Especially of 2 million, that's what, 1%, less than 1% of the population. That's changing and that's growing and it's altering. And it also depends on what scene you're in. I mean, if you're in the kind of like graffiti breakdance scene, there's more people that are involved. But again, we don't have a lot of patronage, so our art scene is underdeveloped, and we don't have a lot of financial support from the city or the county or the state comparatively to, if you were talking about like LA or San Francisco or New York or Chicago or even, I mean, the great city of Houston, Texas or Dallas, Texas, which have amazing art scenes. So yeah, out of that like 2,000 people, there's some amazing, incredible artists. And one of the great parts about Las Vegas is up until a couple of years ago, and I think we all know where finances are in the United States right now, it was a very inexpensive city to live in. So you could live here, have a pretty mid-range day job and dedicate a lot of extra time to your art. You could even kind of raise a family if you wanted to do that. I'm a family person. I have many children. So, yeah, my cat wants...
Many sounds like a lot. How many?
Well, I have 3 biological offspring and 5 stepchildren, although I would never refer to them as that.
Oh my God, that cat just ran over the laptop mic. It's so loud.
The cat?
Yeah.
Oh no, my phone. That's why. Okay. So my phone is actually
where you put it actually sounds a lot better.
Okay. Yeah. No,
Perfect.
That's great.
Awesome.
Yeah. The cat wants to be in.
No. I am totally okay with you having a cat assistant, emotional support podcast.
Probably wants food or water or just love. Most of us, the hierarchy of needs. Okay. So yeah, what were we talking about?
Just the scene. So, are there any big collections there? Are there any actual like? I mean, you frame patronage in terms of like support from the city, but are there any collections that like? Because in Miami, like, and I found in smaller places like those are really where the culture, like their museums or collections. Like, there's the. There, I think the De La Cruz just shut down, but there were a bunch of places where you could go look at really like nice stuff.
So Las Vegas is a hyper privatized city, and you have to keep that in mind. Most of the things that are for the general public are actually private property.
Yeah,
As
yeah.
far as patronage goes, I mean, people don't really buy art here. The extremely wealthy and people that you would consider arts collectors tend to go to places like Miami or Los Angeles,
Yeah, yeah, that makes
or
sense.
all over the globe and buy things. So if you're a working artist here, you can't rely on them for a check, which is why I was talking about kind of public funding,
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
that's that's where, if you don't have a good thing, LA's great, right? Because people get good money and they go out and they buy art. It's just part of the culture
Yeah, yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah. No,
Um,
and there's people in other arts that want to, I was actually just watching a new podcast that I'm like, God damn it, it's so much better. But it's called Bad Art, and they just went through Diddy's collection.
ooh. Oh man, wow.
And
I
anyway, the format is like they have two comedians, and then I guess the Jenny Sparrow is the host. It popped up, and I watched it because it was there's a comedian that I really like, Kurt Metzger, and he was like, so she's basically trying to explain the art world to them, and they just like are such haters. Instead of people that have been like kind of educated within the knowledge base of the art world and are like, oh, Kerry James Marshall, that stuff is really interesting, they rip into it as like novices, and it was very, very funny.
Oh wow. Oh man.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. No, no, no,
That
no.
ends
Yeah.
the plug section of. I forget why I brought it up, but yeah, no. Oh yeah, we were just talking about collections. Yeah, I mean, it's that whole thing is an interesting thing that I'm just starting to learn about now. But like, I think that what was interesting to me is estimating how many artists there are in the city. Like, how did you come to the thousands number? Because
Um,
I have no idea how many there are in LA.
because it's that small. I can kind of like I
Yeah.
show up at the events, I go to the things, and I'm like, okay, there's like, 400 or 500 people I see on a regular basis.
Okay.
Ancillary to them, there's another like 500 people I see on an occasional basis. And then for the really big events, there's like another like, 400 or 500. And then I'm just going to guesstimate that maybe there's 500 out
Yeah.
there that I
Yeah.
just don't even talk to or know.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not saying there aren't more than 2,000 working artists in the city. I'm saying that if you're talking about the scene, you're going to see about the same 2,000 people
Yeah. Yeah. That makes
over and
sense.
over and over again. And in regards to like collections, it is interesting because within that hyper privatization, you have something like the Palms, right, which is an off strip casino, semi for locals, semi for celebrities. And they have a massive collection, a lot of YBA artists, a lot of like,
What's YBA?
young, what is it, young British, whatever the fuck bastards. I can't remember what it is, but it's all those guys. It's Damien Hirst,
Oh, okay. Okay.
and all those cats from like the early '90s that were kind of like those like oh, we're British and we're shocking, and oh my god, it's all blood and weirdness and
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
stuff. The people that own the Palms, they collected a ton of that work, I think, as investments. But now, like, we've got a Damien Hirst shark sitting above a bar it's that kind of thing. Same thing. Like the Bellagio has a gallery, and it's the collections of their private shareholders, and they rotate those through, and they do a show. They actually have like a show opening tonight that I might go to. Um,
Do those
you know,
do they have does that the Damien Hirst above the bar feels very Vegasy, but is there like in the Bellagio, is that like more of a White Cube kind of vibe, or does
the
the
Bellagio
casino
has the Bellagio has a gallery, so
okay,
it,
it's
it
like full
has
on
like
gallery.
there's yeah. When Steve Wynn, who is a horrible human being, originally opened the Bellagio, he was like, because he's one of these rich guys that immediately was like, I'm going to buy all the Picassos. And then he. And
Oh wait, is that the guy? That the one that has the whole entire market cornered? Oh my god!
then he's the one that elbowed the Picasso. I don't know if you know about that story. He was like on an interview. He was on an interview. Yeah, he's like a major casino mogul. He kind of reinvented the city. He's also like, of course, now been thank you Me Too movement, now been outed as like a serial sexual assaulter, and has kind of been defrocked as the owner of his business. Now his wife or ex-wife owns the entire Wynn corporation, which is great because she's a much better human being, and she's putting her money into a museum of art finally opening in Las Vegas, which it's been forever. And we've been promised a museum every 10 years for the last 30 years, right? And still nothing. So we're slated to have an actual museum up and running with help from Elaine Wynn and LACMA, where we're going to take on part of their permanent collection and display it as our permanent collection. So it's a really interesting partnership. I think it's really cool. And then
the elbow story.
Oh, so no, yes. So Steve Wynn, he's showing people, or he bought like, a ton of stuff. He's got like a Jeff Koons and, all that stuff. And he's showing people his art collection. He's talking about the new casino, the Wynn Resort and Casino that he's opening up. And during the talk, he legit puts his elbow through a Picasso and is
accidentally,
like by accident, like, oopsie, I just elbowed a Picasso. Like, and like, it's like this crazy moment, for us in Las Vegas art, where we're like, these are the people that are the wealthiest people that are most concerned about art, and they're like, they're giving the people's elbow to.
But is he the guy that that owns like almost like has most of the No, wait, no. I'm confusing. You said Picasso, and I thought Andy Warhol. There's a guy that has like the market cornered on Andy Warhol, and I got those names confused, even though they have nothing to do with each other. I just got excited about a rich guy that owned a bunch of shit, and I was like, "Is that the guy?
Is that the Warhol guy?" No.
Yeah. But no. Anyway, I've already told the story of the Warhol guy, but basically, he's like, he just gets to sell things. He auctions at every auction. He drives up the price so that like he can sell things for whatever he wants at whatever price. Privately, and then that won't be on record, but it drives up the market. So there's some fun stuff going on. That's kind of like one of the things that I had to accept about this podcast, and the one that I was telling you was like, oh my god, it's so much better. Is that like I'm interviewing artists, they're just trolling the scene,
It's easy to troll, right? Art is living somewhere between like an actual philosophical presentation of what it is to be a human being and create, and some kind of weird Ponzi scheme market share plan where like it's just investment banking with pretty pictures. And so like that's pretty easy to make fun of. You can't talk about like the purity or the radiance of the human experience, which is like the philosophical base for like kind of why we make art, right, as a species, even though it's, I think, if we're really honest about it, it's just, why do we make art as a species? It's like, why do birds build nests and frogs ribbit? Like this, it's a dumb question. If you're not looking at it from just that's what this animal does. This is one of the things this animal does, is like create corollary ideas and aesthetics to appease some inner deep biological need, right? And once you perceive it as a biological need, then there's no question as to why you do anything. It's like yawning. But you can't like expound on like those noble principles that come from kind of like a hyper philosophical Western interpretation of the validity of the arts, and then like be like, but if you invest now, you can triple your market share value in 5 years on this Basquiat, and it's just it's ridiculous.
Well, the one of the things that came up on that show was that they were he owns like a Kerry James Marshall that's very famous, of like the people having the picnic, and that was and
he owns that.
Diddy owns that, yeah. Or
What?
yeah, I mean, I guess he still owns it. He
Yeah.
owns, yeah, he owns a bunch of crazy shit like that. But what is interesting about what they were saying is that like the comedians were upset that I'm like, this has become a a recap of another podcast episode, but they were like shocked and kind of upset that it sold for like 20 million, but he didn't make any of that directly, right? Like that's how much Diddy apparently bought it for. But then she was kind of saying that, well, it still makes his general market kind of increase. So all of this stuff is like so foreign to like 90% of the artists that I mean, it's foreign to me too. You know, I'm not saying that I'm selling shit like that and that I get to complain that my art got resold for 20 million. That seems like, you know, very, very far from my reality. But it is interesting. Like that is what like it's almost like the art scene. If you're not part of it, it's kind of underground, you know, like it's a lot, well, like the community element of it.
Well, I mean, the community element is the reason. But I mean, again, you have to look at these ideas of hierarchy and striation, right? Like what I'm doing here in Las Vegas, and I'm a moderately successful artist, I'd like to think, in this city, which means I don't really make any money and I still need a day job. And I don't do any big sales. Maybe I sell a couple pieces once or twice a year, but I spend more money on my art than I make, right?
Yeah,
inevitably. Like you know, that those notions of like what it is to be a success or whatever. And then you talk to like I was lucky enough to meet Ellen Gallagher this year, and it's a totally different animal. I mean, like she's living in Amsterdam. She has a place in New York. She's like, you know, Gagosian calls her once a week. She's a business person in an industry unto herself, right? You know, very small industry, but in the same right, she has those like those incredible things. And in that scene, they're all community. They're all fam. Like they all know each other. They all, you know, they all of those people in that echelon of art where you can, you know, complain about selling something for $20 million, they're friends. They know each other. They and they're connected by gallerists and curators that you and I don't even really know exist.
For sure.
We're completely in the dark. And that was like the interesting part, is that I'm sitting there with her and a couple of other people, like a representative from Gagosian, and I'm just listening to them talk, and I'm like, it's like, you know, hanging out with a physicist or something. I didn't really grasp what was going on. I can talk to Ellen about like principal ideas in art, but I can't talk to her about art market stuff and what that community is and what that culture is. I don't know how we got here, but
no,
it's cool.
I mean, it's an interesting, to me, it's just interesting to always get a sense of how different communities function and where they fit into the higher, like into the, what the city can provide for them and how they compensate for what's lacking, for what's available, even within LA. I mean, there's like the South Bay is this whole a thriving community that's completely separate, and you know, they have their own art galleries. I know people that run their own space, and that's what they do, you know, that like, and it has very little to do with LA traffic sometimes, you know, I would imagine, because I can't imagine there's a lot of, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe a lot of people from LA go down to these spaces and stuff, but it just seems like self-contained, which is really cool. Well, let's get a little origin before we get into your broader topic, but because I feel like we're going to be at that for picking at that one, at that bone for a bit. But when did you get, like, you grew up in Vegas? That's like where your family's from. Mm-hmm. When did you first decide that when did you first have inklings that art was an interest, and when did you make the transition to deciding I am an artist? You know, because there is something that makes that decision, that need to create, even more heightened when you have to have a separate day job, right? Like, I think that it goes to show you that you kind of can't help yourself. Like, I mean, you know, as somebody who also is not making any money from my art, you know what I mean? Like it's like, what is that need? When did you decide it? And it's a hard thing to kind of just be like, yeah, I'm a fucking artist, you know?
Wow. Okay. So, I mean, So I did not grow up in Las Vegas. I grew up all over. I am completely bi-coastal, as you might describe it. I grew up in LA. I grew up in New Jersey, a little bit in New York, some time in Massachusetts. My father is a professional entertainer. He was a strip headliner for about 7 years. You can look him up. His name's Clint Holmes. He can sing like a motherfucker. He's amazing.
Awesome.
I have a lot of respect for my dad, and I think that it never fully entered as a question because of my parentage. My mother has a master's in theater. She has Emmys from early on in her career before she gave it up to raise me, which again I think might be a mistake. Um, she has Emmys from her work for PBS in Washington D.C. in the 1970s,
Wow.
and
Good
so
PBS.
yeah. Really great PBS. Like when PBS was wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and so both of my parents are creatives. My father fed our entire family off of his performing and music our entire lives. And I grew up with that as the example of what an adult was, right? Like what an adult with a career was.
Yeah.
So I, of course, I think very early on, I mean, I loved drawing. I loved comic books. I always had trouble with words. I have dyslexia a little bit. And so initially I had to learn a lot about words, and drawings were just so much easier for me. And they were really, you're on trains and boats and planes all the time if your parents are traveling, if your fathers are traveling performers. So this is a long before the iPad or even the Game Boy. And so what do you give a kid? Like, right? You give them a coloring book, a sketchbook, some blank pieces of paper. And I really found a whole world in there that
Mm.
I loved. And I was, of course, like kind of reclusive and nerdy and awkward because I transitioned from places and didn't really get to spend a lot of time in places building stable friendships. So that was always difficult. So I had, media. I had comic books. Superheroes are great and the illustrations are amazing. And I grew up on, Kirby and Ditko and thinking Stan Lee was a god, and then becoming an adult and realizing Stan Lee was just the middleman for so many things.
Write your own stories.
Yeah, yeah. And so like that was my youth. It was hopping around, living in different communities, different places, constantly being surrounded by music. I knew I didn't want to go into music. I also am moderately tone deaf, so I can't really sing or dance, and
Oh,
never
wow.
had the dedication. I can dance a little bit, but never had the dedication to learn an instrument. And I
No, but
always
the
just
singing
wanted.
part, the tone deaf part is pretty interesting, especially because your dad is. I mean,
Well,
I'm
my
not
mom,
like
but my
I'm
mom
not
can't
sure.
sing at all. My mom can't sing at all. My brother and sister can sing. They're twins. They got the DNA. I didn't. I didn't get
You
the
got
DNA.
the
I got the
fan DNA.
yeah. I got yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Um. So yeah. I mean, my father gave up on me very early because I'm sure there was a point where he said, "I have a son. He will sing like I do," and then I don't know. It must have been like 7 or 8 years old. He was like, "That boy cannot sing,"
Wow.
and that's fine. I wasn't that interested in singing or in music. I was interested in media, in culture, and in making and rendering my own images and playing with those ideas. And I still can spend hours, hours and hours and weeks and days just alone in that little world. And that's the reason you make art, right?
Yeah.
It didn't have anything to fucking do with anybody else. It's like this beautiful internal blossoming that you get to experience for yourself. And then you're like, hey, I had this really incredible moment of experience. Here's the thing that came out of it. And then people were like, oh,
Yeah.
that's all right. And, you know, don't look for approval uh, from others on its internal majesty, internal beauty, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so when I decided I was an artist, I don't know. I went through a long stint of like rambling drug abuse and alcoholism in my like late teens, early 20s,
Hmm.
normal like upper middle class 90s kid stuff.
What city were you in when that was going down?
I mean, Las Vegas. I was in fucking
Okay.
Las Vegas. Like, had I been in like New York or Los Angeles or something, it would have been a lot harder. The city consolidates vice like nowhere else, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
not. that's not like a myth, right? Like if you want to be addicted to something, it doesn't matter what it is, come to Las Vegas. We will rock
Miami
you.
I had the same vibe in Miami. So, but like, you know how like did you ever have that friend that could spot the heroin? Like the person that definitely had heroin. We can
Yeah.
spot cities.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like
I'm
you're
like,
like, oh,
I'm like, oh yeah, no, I could totally see that. There's like a story of like Jenna Jameson like just doing acid out on the street with her brother, like kind of making sure she was okay and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I could totally see that. Although it was probably I have my stories about doing acid in Vegas, and it was not fun. we were on the strip, and it was like, oh, yo, this is dark.
people think people see like people read Fear and Loathing or see the movie or whatever, and they think like, oh yeah, hallucinogens, Las Vegas, and I'm like, this is the darkest place.
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
the black little heart of capitalism, guys. Like none of this is meant for humans. This is a complete extortion thing, and it's kind of evil.
Yeah.
So
There's
in a
nowhere to sit.
beautiful nightmare way.
Yeah,
No, there's
no,
nowhere to sit.
there's nowhere to sit. There's like noises to keep people moving. The only places you can sit, it's like we ended up sitting in front of a slot machine.
Yeah.
Just like,
And then you're like hallucinating wildly, and the slot machine is like, just pull the thing and numbers and glitter. And you're like, I don't. This is not.
yeah,
Where's the? Yeah, I mean, the thing you got to know is if you're really into like hallucinogens, is you got to get out of the city because the desert's amazing for
yeah. That was I learned that the hard way. But
yeah.
Go ahead.
And
Sorry.
most people do. No, but I mean, I really went through that whole thing, and when I started to sober up and really clean up my life, I was like, hey, the one thing that's been with you through this entire damn thing, right, is art. You still love doing it. You still love making it, and it became a recuperation and a recovery tool for me. And it was really important in that way. And that's when I was like, oh, I'm an artist, I guess. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I call myself an artist because there's no other way to explain the level of erratic behavior, need, and subtle narcissism that exists within my persona.
No.
It's not. It's not like there's no other label for that, right? I like making images. I like doing performance art. I love making video work. I make big sculptures when I can afford it, and I like doing all that stuff and making all those things happen in my life. And it's a hell of a lot more fun than, like, I don't know, having a video game addiction, to my mind, right? So
You also you could do both.
well, yeah, I mean, I'm not saying you
No,
can't.
I'm just saying I have a video game addiction.
And,
Not really, but
I love me some video games too. I mean, I think we're relatively corollary ages, and that's part of our like brain development, right? There's a point at which somebody handed you a little box and was like, I don't know, just leave me alone while I chain smoke or go out dancing, and you're like, oh, okay, adult. Oh, let me live in this box for a little while, and now there's a part of our brain that's always appeased by that, right?
Yeah.
And that instance is just growing. I'm kind of thrilled by some of the people that are doing interesting digital work, but I'm really waiting for this next generation, the kids that are like, between like 10 and 20 right now, to start producing just insane digital art that we can't even comprehend properly, with that undergirding of video game technology. So long story short, I guess somewhere around 2010, I started calling myself an artist, and I started participating in the art scene, and that community became vital for me. And I'm a big promoter of Las Vegas, what Las Vegas is, what Las Vegas isn't, and the art scene and the artists of Las Vegas, whom I love and cherish dearly, even though they're all quite a pain in the ass.
Yeah. I mean, artists are artists.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can't get around that one.
Yeah, you said something about narcissism earlier.
Well,
I'm just saying that is an underlying current of like, and then the idea of control over how you come across. It's like, and sometimes I have people come on the podcast. I'm like, oh, you totally don't understand the medium. Like,
exactly. I mean, when I say that, it's because I've worked with enough that's coming directly from a like
I
a
100% agree with it. You know,
no
like I
no,
mean, yeah,
but it's
like
coming directly from a person that like knows more artists and more rich and famous artists than I'll ever know. And she works for Gagosian, right? And that's it, right?
yeah,
If you work
yeah,
for
yeah,
Gagosian, like you're going to meet every prominent artist in the world or have some corollary to them. And she just like will outwardly and openly say on a regular basis, all artists are narcissists. And it like hit me the first time. I was like, that's not. Oh no,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that's super fucking true.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I mean,
uh,
not maybe not like the clinical definition of narcissism, but in the in the colloquialism of how that of usage of the word narcissist,
oh
like
yeah,
that. I think it definitely is a fair assessment at every level. It is you know, like it's so it's you have to have a really specific thing to make you want to express something and define your voice and things like that. Those are all somewhat self-indulgent pursuits that you need to make time for. You know, and it's an interesting thing, but at the same time, I think that like there are a lot of people that don't fulfill that you know, like that's kind of what the whole the self-help book, the Artist's Way, is about, which is like just like the idea that there's people that are artists but they don't fulfill that part of themselves and they just feel empty inside, you know, which I have definitely experienced myself. So it is narcissistic, but it's also like there's just something wrong with us, man. Like in the
no,
best way possible.
yeah, I think that like I think that you have to have a strong sense of self preservation, a strong sense of self, and an understanding of what the self and the other and the outside world is to be an arts practitioner. It's a losing game. Most people never make it to even selling paintings for thousands of dollars or pieces of art
Yeah,
for
yeah.
thousands of dollars, let alone tens or hundreds or millions of dollars, right? Like that's just not how it works. So why are you doing this? And like I said, it's internal. And I think anything that's that deeply internal that you're then willing to put out in the world and show to other people and
Hmm.
you have to there has to be a tiny little narcissistic bastard in there that's like I am the best thing that ever existed, and you
Yeah.
have to like accept that person and then also recognize that like sometimes he needs to like go back into his like weird little selfishness hole. um
But I also think that there's like a also like there's a loneliness in art making that I think that it is part of where that narcissism comes out. Like I've said it before on the show that one of my art teachers told me that there's like a Freud quote that I've never been able to find on Google, but just like basically saying that like the artists really what they want is essentially approval, right? Like we're making these objects, you know, which you kind of hinted at towards before. Like it is part of the struggle. You were talking about how like you don't need other people's approval, but the impulse of being an artist, I think, is very much tied to that feeling of like I want, you know, I want this stuff to be validated, which is like why I'll post stuff and it doesn't get any likes, and I'm like, oh, which is totally what you were.
I mean, I think also like I think the internet has ruined humanity because like,
Maybe
but
social
no,
media more than the
so
internet.
yeah, the internet's amazing. Social media is a nightmare. But like you look at social media, and these were lives and creative paths, right? The influencer path is in a lot of ways a hyper corporatized kind of product and image oriented path of an artist
Yeah.
in a weird way, right? And it's kind of destroyed. It's all look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. It's all the desire to be perceived. It's all the desire to be seen, and that is a healthy desire in moderation.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
should not be distributed to human beings grand mal and told that it is a career path. That is
yeah,
not good. It's very bad, and
yeah,
we're at the tip of the iceberg for those results right now of a whole generation of human beings that are like, well, why don't I get this many likes? And
yeah.
why don't I? and are just
I
doing
can't
shit,
imagine what it's like to be a kid growing up because
Ugh.
I'm barely well adjusted to it as an adult, having all this like information. Like I get sucked into it, and if something gets likes, it's really hard to just kind of be like, I don't know. It's hard to engage in it the way that I have to for the show,
Mm-hmm.
without it being like without it sucking me in at like the darkness of it is still part of my relationship to it, you know. But I do think that we just kind of watched, and I don't want to talk about the election, but we just kind of watched the death of legacy media in this really interesting way where like all of those we're gonna see a lot of people, a lot of influencers getting like political funding, you know, to do shows and stuff like that. Like I think that there was a very strong realization that this shift, economic shift in funding these things, like where the money is going to go, it's probably not going to go into like MSNBC. I think Comcast is trying to sell MSNBC. And like the only one that doesn't seem, well, whatever. But basically basically like it's like all of their audiences have died, you know, or are slowly dying. The
Yeah.
main people that watch that are really old, and now so if you want, it's not a thing where you can prop this old media. It's like trying to make people listen to radio in their houses like they used to, you know. And that's an analogy somebody I heard from somebody. That's not like me being a genius, but it is an interesting time, and one of the things that I find interesting about the whole shift is that like now art is no longer art. Like basically you have this format that we have infrastructure, and the thing that fills that infrastructure is content, right? And that used to be something that we called art, and to some degree it invalidates the art, but it also makes it a product that makes it more economically viable for artists, you know, like to have more direct, like, you know, making sales off of Instagram and stuff like that. I definitely know people that do that. There's like coaches. There's this woman called Martha May that does this like or no, the accelerator program is something else. There's a bunch of schools that kind of, after you go to grad school and all of that, they teach you how to become a business person in the art world, right? And so Martha May is one of those people. But it is an interesting thing because, like, I think that academia in and of itself is sort of, it's so saturated with people who are trying to get jobs in it, especially in the art realm, because that, you know, because that is pretty much the career path that the people teaching the art have undergone. So it's an interesting time. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see where shit goes, you know, like there really is. Go ahead. Sorry. It
No,
sounds like
no,
you
no,
have
no, no.
thoughts.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm a vehement anti-capitalist. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
like I believe humanity is, and the United States is the spearhead of this thing, is on the wrong path. We do things for money as opposed to for each other, which is disgusting
Yeah.
on so many levels. I can't really explain it. Um, like money's completely fucking made up, and I think the majority of us have forgotten that like commerce is real, right?
Yeah.
Money is not, capital is not, investment banking is not, the stock market's not real, none of that shit's real. Commerce is real,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
People exchanging goods and services, that's real. That's never not existed. um and you know, I look at what art has become, and that product base, that content fill that you're talking about, that infrastructure fill, it unsettles me because I'm seeing a generation of artists that in a lot of ways don't understand not only why they're doing what they're doing, but don't understand its fundamental and inherent validity and value, the inherent value of the creative process. And I know this has been going on for quite some time, but it seems so saturated and so heightened at this point. It frightens me. You go over to a place like here in Vegas, we had, like, you know, the weird Meow Wolf come in, and we have one of those here, and that's
What's Meow
not,
Wolf? I know the
you don't
term, but
know.
I just
It's
I'm blanking on what it is.
they're like an amusement park or a department store, but like artsy. Like they're it's like a psychedelic art exhibition. They started in Santa Fe, New Mexico. George R. R. Martin funded a bunch of their stuff. They're like a weird little art cult. They're hyper capitalist. Like they're like, we're an arts organization, but in actuality, they're really just kind of like an adult inebriated fun house, right? So like if you're on mushrooms, they're a really cool place to go in Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
And like they're fully art as product, right? Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
they're paying a lot of artists. A lot of artists are making good money. I cannot like look down my nose at that aspect. I can
Mm-hmm.
look at and say, but yeah, but you're like a low rent Disneyland. If you're an arts organization, then Disneyland is an arts organization, and we can have that conversation and argue that all day long. I wouldn't say Disneyland isn't an arts organization, but I would say then the broader notion of what art is to the human species changes from an inherently gifted activity from the human mind to a product based ideal to appease capitalist structures. And that's not really interesting to me. That's not hot. Like, it's not sexy to me.
Yeah, yeah.
Everybody else is like on that vibe, but it's not sexy to me. Like, I'd love to make money at my art, but in the same right, like, I'm gonna be on my deathbed being like, oh, maybe I can get like one more drawing out. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
just not for anybody else's vindication, just because I'd rather be drawing than anything else. I don't know. Yeah, maybe I'm a curmudgeon though. I don't. Maybe I just don't get things, and I'm an old man and shit.
I
But
mean, I don't think I necessarily disagree with you. The one thing that you said about money not being real is I would push back on that, because it's like money is very real in the sense that like it like the reason that it has value, and I think that Americans don't really consider this much, is that like the reason that our dollar has value is that most of the world's trade happens in it, and it has, and like what really backs that value is like, overthrowing governments that might undermine that global hegemony, right? So I mean, I know you didn't mean it like I'm not like chastising you. I'm just saying that like that is a common thought about it, but it really is, when that goes away, that's when the money, you realize that the money is not real, but it's really backed by violence. The value of our dollar.
no,
Yeah. I'm sure you knew this. It's just one of those things and I bring that up because I wanted to maybe transition a little bit into your topic, which the only thing that I want to be very careful about is that we are going to be on YouTube. As long as we don't dehumanize anybody in this conversation.
yeah,
And I didn't think that you would. I just want to make sure. I also state it on the podcast so that people know what the rules are when they come on, if they've listened to an episode. So yeah. I'm happy to talk about, because you're talking in a much more abstract way. But if the wars come up,
certainly will. I don't have any interest in dehumanizing anyone.
No. I didn't get that. You don't give me that vibe at all. But yeah, go ahead. So you wanted to talk a little bit about peace in a very interesting. Maybe this is just too direct to throw you right into it.
Let's do it. Yeah, I think, and I want to get back to money, because what you said about money is the truth about money, which is money doesn't have any value, but violence sure as hell does.
Yeah. No,
Violence
definitely.
and violence is the marketplace, right? And
Yeah.
that's kind of that's and maybe it's in light of the last like 8 years of my existence. I think I was allowed to be a naive little baby, and you go through all these like amazing hippie phases. Where
How
you're
old are
talking
you?
about like I'm 45.
You're 45. Oh, okay. So you're Gen X too. I'm the last year. I'm Gen X by 1 year. 81 is the cutoff.
81,
No, I'm 80. I'm 80. 81 is millennial. So I'm like, but we have we grew up with the same wars.
Yeah.
And I think one important thing is that we also remember talking to vets of the Vietnam War and seeing those movies, and what's happening concurrently is resonating with us in a way that we could not, when they explained it to us, we could not understand it.
No, and now
I started reading Manufacturing Consent right when the whole thing started to go off after October 7th. And I had to stop because I was like, I can only know so much of the horrors of what we did. But we did some fucked up shit to South Koreans that like
Yep.
that I did not know about until I started reading that book. But anyway, so
No,
yeah.
so my thesis is that peace, as noble a human notion as it may or may not be, is just that it is a fictitious human idea, not an inherent state. It may
Mm,
be a concept or ideal to strive for as a species, an individual, or group. And I think that there's tons of text to back this notion up. But it it is actually something that we've invented that we then go around and go, well, why isn't there peace? And I'm like, listen, there is no solid example of standardized lasting peace from moment to moment within our existences, right? It's just
yeah.
like happiness or joy. We always are striving for joy or happiness, but that is not the structure of the universe. And even when we go and we like, you go to a meadow and you're looking out on a beautiful vista and you're like, oh, it's so peaceful out there. It's like, well, not for the hundreds of billions of bugs that are running around eating each other, not for
Yeah,
the
yeah.
bacterial life forms or the plants that are struggling to survive the conditions they exist within. There's no peace there. There's constant conflict. And
I think about animals in the ocean and the fucking anxiety of existing like that. Like,
dolphins are bastards. Anyway, no, it's true, right? Like just like I'm just floating around and something could come up and eat me.
from any angle, like
And
at least as a land mammal, like maybe you're not expecting things to come from underneath you. Maybe a
you or
bird will attack you, but Jesus Christ, it's fucking scary in the ocean, man. That is like
I,
terrifying. That's scarier to me than being marooned in space.
yeah, because at least you're just gonna die from oxygen
Yeah,
deprivation or
yeah,
cold or
yeah,
something. Like you're just stuck in outer space. Like, oh yeah, like yeah, no, in the ocean, no, the ocean is like the most terrifying thing.
yeah, yeah,
I can think, and I don't mean that from like really, like I've been on lots of boats and I go to the sea and I'm always like, this is the scariest damn thing in the world. People that like hang out here that are comfy here are like a different breed of human being. I have nothing but
yeah.
respect for like deep
I,
sea divers that are like,
I like boats,
uh,
but being deep in the ocean, like it can be terrifying. I am a Florida boy though, so
yeah,
yeah, I have an affinity for fucking just water sports, which is like such a it feels like such a lame thing, like it feels like jet skis and shit like that, which I like. But like
yeah.
it just seems like such an American thing to be like, I'm into water sports, dog.
No, well, yeah, it definitely is. Like you have to have an incredible amount of capital and hubris to be like, yeah, we just go play on the water with engines, bro. And it's like that is
Yeah.
insane. Everybody else that has a relationship with the water around the globe, it's primarily fishing,
Yeah,
guys.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
a survival aspect.
But I grew up with those hydroplane boats, man. The ones that they used to smuggle drugs in with, like the ones from
Like
the
lift
drugs.
up, like
Yeah, the ones
oh,
that like basically like fucking Formula One cars that were boats that had a jet engine on them. I used to go and watch those in Florida. So it is a very funny. I'm more into like water sports like kayaking and shit like that, and canoeing. But
those are like the holistic water sport. It's like kayaking is like the yoga of water sport, right?
but it still is a Florida man vibe that I
Oh,
have.
absolutely. Well,
Anyway,
I
I
mean,
keep interrupting you.
no. Also, like I do want to make like the caveat that like when you describe those like hydrofoil things, like they're so
Yeah, they're
cool.
fucking
Like
awesome.
they're the coolest thing. And like I'm not gonna deny cool stuff, whether or not it feels like absurd or hyper American or ridiculous. like those things are so cool. And if you like were like, yo man, get in one right now, I'd be like, you wouldn't even put my shoes on, man.
And we
So
also like
no,
we throw like stuff into the ocean to build coral reefs, which is kind of
yeah,
crazy. Like we throw
yeah,
junk in the ocean. It's like, oh, it'll be a nice coral reef. But anyway, sorry,
yeah.
you were gonna say something.
No, 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 no. And that's like amazing. But like also like, yeah, I mean, I just think we're at like a really weirdly apocalyptic point within the species. Like whether you're talking about the climate crisis, the myriad wars, and like also recognize that domestically, like statistically, which I don't know how where the viability is there. But if you're living in Western civilization, we are the most peaceful we've ever been. And that's with
Yeah,
school shootings, that's with crime rates, that's with everything. We're the most placated as a general populace, and like really all of these things are like population control and the notion of peace to a larger hierarchical state, a governmental state, versus the notion of peace to an individual are two very different things. To a state, peace is being able to enact violence without it being reciprocal, right? We had all these
yeah,
weird cries during the election season for like no political violence. And I'm like, I don't know, man. Political violence gets shit done. Like
yeah,
the American Revolution, French Revolution, like political violence actually makes change. Like, so like, I don't know why we're sitting here being like, boo, political violence. It's like, if there's any use for violence in our society, that's where it should be allocated, right? Is like, let's go and
yeah.
like, I mean,
Well, but I
and
think
again,
I
that's
think I think that is an idea that gets very dangerous for the people in charge. So, like, I mean, I think that like if there's this guy Caleb Malpin that I saw talk a little bit about Susan Sontag, and there's really interesting. I don't know all the details to kind of not butcher it, but it's something to the effect of like how her relationship with the CIA was not necessarily where that she was like deliberately an asset, but if you look at some of her writings, like she wrote a thing. I'm forgetting the details, but she wrote a critique of some specific person that was like a Nazi and stuff. But Caleb Maupin's point was that the way that she wrote about it was to alienate communism, right? So it was a specific perspective that made it so that communist like ideas could not take root because of some. It's a very technical argument. I need to watch it again to, but you get the general gist, right? You're following me. And
oh yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
yeah, and so that kind of, I think it to me, the last few years, what they have taught me is that concept of the banality of evil, where it's like people, I always use, because I grew up in Italy, I always use as an example is that the mafia were anti-fascists, and the only time the mafia came close to being eradicated was during the fascist period. The fascists were the only ones that came close to like really dismantling it, right, to like the point where it doesn't exist anymore or anything like that. And what I find interesting about that is that like you see that shit happening like now in El Salvador, where people are becoming more fascist because the fucking like people are getting extorted, people are having these like really things that really affect their lives in a way, and then they want the crackdown, they want some sort of order and some sort of control, and you know then the Italian fascism gets merged with the Francos and the Germans, who are actually killing their own people, and then that's where it escalates out of fucking control. Not that the fucking Italians were that great either, but they weren't like that's why they separate it with the capital F fascism, which would be the Italian fascism, right? So to me, it's all interesting how these like things are like I watch people just kind of make arguments about things, and I'm like, oh, you don't realize that like you are part, like everybody talking about privilege. Like one of the things that's craziest to me is that like Latinos have ties to people that live in countries that are constantly getting fucked with by the US government, so they have an understanding of the privilege that comes with having an American passport, which doesn't seem to resonate with like anybody that doesn't really have an idea of how America puts its foot down on everything.
Yeah. No, we're the darling fascist bully boy of the world, and now now we're really getting cooking, right? We're explicitly fascist instead of like covertly fascist.
Yeah.
We're no longer like codifying it with like subtle language. But the problem is,
Yeah, we're less Orwellian and more direct.
yeah, exactly. The problem is, guys, that inevitably fascism does not work, first and foremost, and second of
Yeah.
all, it eats its own.
Mm-hmm.
And the real problem, real reason people are scared of fascism in the United States is because not only are we like massively diverse and insanely privileged, let's be real here,
Yeah.
on multiple levels. And when I talk about insanely privileged, I mean we do not, like, we are on fucking easy mode, man. Except for
Everybody
like,
uses our money because we beat the shit out of everybody who doesn't.
yeah. When you made them use our money, they're like, no, you're going to use this. I mean, there's some.
I
Really
mean, that's
interesting
Libya. That's like literally every fuck in the like. We're going back to Obama eras. This is the ultra nationalism. You know, it's crazy. Sorry, I keep cutting you off.
No, man, no.
I'm just excited, bro.
You're saying things that I like. You know, I mean, like, there's and like, fuck, man. I was like in the airport when they found what's his name, Gaddafi. You know, do you remember
Oh
that
my
moment?
god, yeah, I
Where it's
remember.
like on TV, and then and like I'm watching this, and it's on everything. Like this poor fucking dude, like he's like coming out of a bunker covered in blood, and I'm just like, this is it. Like
Yeah,
we are fucking savages. God damn it.
yeah, yeah.
There is no um there's no argument you can give me that doesn't say we aren't the most terrifying people. So
That dude fucked up by dismantling his nuclear arms program. That's that's how that was a fuck up, and ain't nobody ever doing that again.
Which is like, but like, listen to how insane that statement is.
Yeah.
He had to stop having the most scary, devastating fucking weapon on the planet, so that, and that was his mistake.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean. So here's the thing that I'm sitting in, and this is my thesis, and I want it to be wrong. I want to be wrong about this shit. My thing is our noble concept of peace just a delusion that we've been trying to sell each other for centuries, through religion, through philosophy, through different texts, through different actions? And the reality is, like, we're a species that helped extinct every other upright walking ape on the planet, right? We helped extinct the goddamn woolly mammoth. Like, we're not solely, right? We interbred Neanderthals and killed the rest of them, right? Neanderthals are gone. Like, they were there, right? Go way back into the way back machine here and like talk about like we're like the most hyper competitive angry apes on the damn globe, and then we're like, but like what we really crave and need is like care and peace, and like I'm like,
we just want to be loved, man, in this cruel world.
I'm trying to process my trauma, and I'm like, dude, that's all I like, part of my brain at this point, and I don't like saying this, and please prove me wrong, human species, but my brain is like, it's trauma all the way the fuck down. We've been like you're not processing anything that isn't already invented, and like that we in America, in the West, sit around and we're like, my trauma is really like, it's really triggering and shit, and I'm like, dude, they're like kids living out of like garbage cans a block away from here, dude, not even like in another country, right? And we have like the mamby-pamby bullshit. So like, okay, then we like accept that like maybe like human beings are deeply and inherently violent and cruel, and all of those terrifying aspects are real. And then I kind of like look at the way that American hegemony works, the way that Western hegemony works, the way that all of this fucking violence occurs within our civilization, and I question whether or not like it isn't appropriate to use violence to attempt to control the world, because that's what people keep doing over and over and over again. That's what we are as a species. I'd love to be incorrect about this. But
I would say that we're also coming from a very American perspective, which our legacy is like we won the Second World War and we were the heroes of that shit, and then from there, the industry, like there aren't other countries that have the same fucking arms, but like military industrial complex of the same extent. I mean, like if you look at the number of bases that other countries have, so there's interesting stuff happening, like America uses soft power and hard power. I remember when I was a kid, my dad worked in Africa a lot for the UN, for the Food and Agriculture Organization, and one of the things that really pissed him off is how much like my dad was like kind of a proponent of Linux and stuff like that, and he was always very frustrated with how Microsoft would just like Bill Gates would just give free computing products so that they would be locked into their ecosystem, right? And so he started to kind of work as a side thing, but then it became his main thing in retirement. My dad, he started to kind of make like do studies on internet cafes in Africa and how those were helpful to closing the digital divide. He had a thing called E for All, which was not ecstasy for all, but electronics for all or whatever. I forget exactly, but basically like, but that's kind of like, you know, China's is people are freaking out over here, and because China's really doing some infrastructure projects over there that are kind of so there are definitely different ways of imposing power, right? Like that don't necessarily have to be violent. I think it's very true that America is. I kind of push back on like, you know, on people like Joe Rogan's and stuff like that that are like, and I like Joe Rogan. This is not a dig on him, but this is a position. He's the most famous person that I've heard express this position. But that like, if we don't have all the nukes, then someone else will. And I don't think that is necessarily the cultural agenda of everybody. But I do agree with you on a very specific premise, the element of the premise that you're talking about, which is that, you know, that I think that like humans are just fucking animals, right? And we try to play psychological games with ourselves and try to tell ourselves that we are secular humanists, and that is like, you know, more enlightened than being religious or whatever. But then we start hating people that are religious because they're not secular human, and then it just becomes factionism. And at the same, and like what you have removed has not solved the issue of hatred or resentment or bigotry or anything like that. And then we come up with different, like one of the things that I've heard a lot recently, which is kind of wild to me. I was kayaking with my friend, water sports, and and he was saying to me, like he basically said to me, and other friends that I have, and I don't want to like shame anybody for having this thought. This is a thought that is being expressed, but there's two things that are coming out of liberalism, which is Reaganism, neoliberalism, right? Which is very postmodern. Two different sentences that people are resonating with. Which one is like minorities can't be racist because of systemic racism. Okay, that one is less of troublesome to me. The one that's fucking crazy that I keep hearing. That I'm not attacking anybody who has said this publicly. I just think that they haven't thought it through, and and the only reason that I'm aware of this is because I've seen it happen. There's this dude that's a douchebag from Miami called I forget, Myron Gaines or something. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He's part of a podcast called Fresh and Fit. So whatever. He was in a Discord. Like I saw this through Abba and Preach. He was in a Discord chat where he was there with, like, he's a black dude. He was there with a bunch of white supremacists that were talking, and he was sort of kind of like trying to appease them and be like, no, I think that you guys have interesting points and all that. They just kept calling him the N-word. They just kept insulting him and not letting him be part of white supremacy. So what I think people are trying to say, that when they say minorities can be white supremacists, which is the exact opposite and diametrically opposed to the other thing they say, which is minorities can't be racist because of systemic racism. The reality is that white supremacy does not allow for people that are, you know, maybe they'll use you to get to where they want to go, but eventually you're not in the club. So what they're trying to say, I think, is that minorities can be racist, which I totally agree with.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I mean, like, but I think, like, I think minorities can espouse, adhere, and live in service to white supremacist ideals and ideologies.
But they can't inherently be
But
white.
you can't be a white supremacist because you're not actually in the club. You have to be white to be a white supremacist. Yeah, yeah, that's just them's the rules. You can't. But
they wouldn't even let fucking Catholics in the KKK, dog.
No, they wouldn't. Which I love, and I wish it was still. I wish the KKK. I wish all the Nazis were still like fucking Catholics. Like I wish all the fascists were still like it'd be so much more fun if they were like, God damn it, these Catholics. Like when did that end? Like after the fucking like Irish Civil War ended, like it was just done with fucking like Catholics versus Protestants, which was the silliest white people war of all time. No, but like, the problem is we do, and I think you've experienced this in your community, and I certainly have experienced it in mine. And like, let's be real here. Living in service to white supremacy doesn't mean that you believe in any of those ideals, because we live in a largely systemic white supremacist culture, right? So even in doing X or Y or Z action or behavior, you can still serve white supremacist ends without ever having any intention of fucking with them. That's what the whole decolonization movement is. That's what the whole notion is. It's that you, like, not only are you colonized externally, right, fiscally from with militaristic pressure and but internally you have been indoctrinated into this systemic racism of society where, like, I have to have conversations with like my indigenous homies because like some of them have beef with black people, and like my black homies who are like, like will pop off about like Jewish people or Hispanic people. And it's like, all of these are divisive things that white supremacy has put upon us because everybody's arguing about who gets to be closest to whiteness. There's no like that's, but that's what ends up happening, right? That's what's happening. So you can serve white supremacy and still not enjoy not enjoy white supremacy. Who's enjoying white supremacy right now, guys? Who's enjoying white supremacy right now? There's plenty of people enjoying white supremacy out there.
No, I mean, I think that when you say that, I think of like taxes, right? Like, where are our tax dollars going right now? Right now. We all have to go to work. So yeah, I agree with you. We are all serving white supremacists. White supremacy. Am I a white supremacist because of that? You could make the rhetorical argument, yeah. But when they start killing people, they're going to be like, you're Spanish. You're not Anglo-Saxon.
It's incredible the depths of this thing. When you start to look at it, and you have to look away every so often.
But
it's just it's awful, and it's insidious on a level that as I've aged, I'm capable of perceiving it more and more. Because I mean, I think in my, when I was a kid, my mother, was some kind of activist and very much so about Black Lives Mattering, without ever having to say it like that. And she gave me all the warnings, but there was also that black middle class thing, which was like, never show your ass in front of fucking white people. Why?
Yeah.
Why never show your ass in front of white people? Because white people already expect you to show your ass, right? They already have a preconceived notion of who you are and what your value as a human being. And again, we've created meritocracies for human beings based on skin color and location. There's something deeply wrong with these notions. There's something.
And also there's a conformity to WASP culture in that, right? Because like white people are very, very, very reserved. Like Anglo-Saxon Protestant white people are very, 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 very reserved. They're much more likely to kind of not talk about their feelings publicly and stuff like that. So there's a conformity to that, right? As a Latino, like, we just show our ass.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm like currently in a relationship with a Latino, and like I even get, because I grew up in like kind of like middle class white suburbs a lot. Like she does shit that I'm like, whoa, hey, girl, like, wait, why are we showing our ass like that right now? And like, and I'm like, look, the white people are looking. Be careful. Like I still have that living inside of me, where like
Yeah.
I'm. But then she has all these weird other codifiers that I'm like, well, that's white supremacy right there. Like she's like,
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
do
yeah.
that. That's like that's a thing you shouldn't do. And I'm like, oh, that's weird, because I think that adheres to a couple of values that don't have anything to do with who you or I are.
Yeah.
But I mean, again, like that reservation, it's and we can get deep in this shit. That's another kind of fucking cultural violence, because like the truth of the matter is, right, like right, the difference between like an upper class or a middle class white person that has those like waspy, like suppressive behaviors, and a white trash person, like a poor white person, is just the expression of emotion and need,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because the expression of need, the expression of pain, the expression of feelings is
Yeah.
inappropriate or unacceptable, and is to be looked down upon. They do violence upon their own kind, and then that violence is perpetuated into all the other ethnicities as an inherent trait, right? Oh,
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
black people are so angry. Latinos are so spicy. They're so blah, 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 right? Like we get then thrown an emotional prescriptive that has nothing to do with
Yeah.
anything that we are, and then we have to live against it, right?
Yep.
And
Yeah, yeah.
it's like so, and if that ain't violence, I don't know what the fuck is, because that's in your goddamn head, right? Like
Yeah.
I like if you punch me in the mouth and you like bloody my nose or whatever, like that's something that will heal. I don't know how to heal all of the things in my head that tell me that I'm skateboarding around the nightmare of white supremacy, right? Or
Yeah.
how to navigate that. Um,
Yeah. No, and I mean it's a continue our empire is just a continuation of the British Empire. So if you get into that history, and you get into like one of my favorite things is like like all these like progressive news programs, they're always coming out with or like news organizations that may have been at one point as prestigious as your mother's a PBS, right? Where they actually, before they got whatever, infiltrated, however you want to describe it incentivized financially to maybe change their positions and whatnot, to like from liberal to neoliberal. But like you see all these stories that are insane. Like there's like all these things about how like I remember I got one really mad one time. I was like, they were like talking about Gandhi being a creep, and I'm like, bro. Then I looked at what they say about like Winston Churchill, and I'm like, oh my god, that like what?
Yeah, Gandhi was a creep. Winston Churchill hero.
was, yeah, like it's like, bro, that guy fucking murdered. That guy was like Hitler to the Indians, right? So
Yeah.
it's fucking crazy how it's the compartmentalization. I think that like and I think that I keep railing against postmodernism because I don't think a lot of people really understand what postmodernism is. But that ability, that duality of like black people can't, or minorities can't be racist, minorities can be white supremacist, like that is how postmodernism is up its own ass. It can take any position. It's not empirical. It is not even spiritual. It is just like it is a reasoning exercise that is not pragmatic, which is why a lot of philosophy nowadays doesn't really pan out. But going back to the secular humanist thing, is like, who was like famously secular?
Gillette is a famously atheistic human.
No, I'm saying like the Nazis were fucking a secular society. They were occultists and shit. But that goes to what I'm talking about. Like even when you are secular, you can't fight these human tendencies to have like beliefs that are obscure and shit like that, which is why it's a secular community, but they were super into the fucking occult,
Well, yeah, because the occult's rad, and there's like skulls
It's fucking
and shit.
awesome.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's rad. I mean, like, theology is rad, and the idea that like you can scribble some weird shit and it has a mystical meaning and an effect. Like human beings are always going to be looking for third place, right? Because we
Yeah.
live in two places. We live here in our brains, right? Right, like in this non, non-real place, but we pull things out, we make them real from in here, right? That's part of what art making is. That's part of what all human creativity is. And we also live in the very physical world, and we're always looking for that third place, right? Which is where I think mysticism, occultism, all spirituality kind of lives, in the third place, right? Between the imagined imperceptible backlog that is human consciousness, this weird wormhole of a brain we have, and the physical reality that we have to exist within. There's this, like, we're like looking for that sliver. That's what all of that is, and it's super cool. The third place is cool, because it sort of is real, but it's not real, but it sort of is real, like,
Yeah, yeah.
which is kind of like a lot of things about humans.
But if you like hate Christians, but you also have crystals, like fuck off.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't. I mean, I think I would never espouse hating Christians. I dislike any form or version of oppressive cultural hegemony. Right? Like,
Yes,
I
yes.
dislike the idea that somebody can come into my house and tell me, "So this is how it's going to be now because I think that's how it is," and it's like,
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
fuck you, dude. That's not it.
yeah,
Right? I don't. I dislike Christians like I dislike cops. They're just trying to tell me what to do with my life, and they're wrong, because that's
yeah,
not
yeah.
my life. That's not what I want to do, right? Um,
And just to, I've been thinking a little bit as we continue to talk, just to clarify for YouTube purposes, we were not advocating for violence. When we were talking about, the Russian, no, the French Revolution and all of that. I just want to make sure. I think usually if you clarify these things on YouTube, you're good from getting flagged. So we're not. We definitely. This guy, Brent, does not strike me as a very violent person or someone who is advocating for violence. I just want to be stated clearly for the podcast gods, because in this climate, nobody here is advocating. We're just observing the fact that nobody really why it is that we can't do it, and why it is a bad thing, or why it is whatever. I've said it, what I had needed to say. We don't want people to hurt anybody. We don't want you to go shoot anybody or anything like that. We're just thinking about historically. Yes, violence does seem to have some effects, although it also destroys the people that commit it. If you look historically, it can be very damaging to the people. So it's not something that's taken lightly. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure we didn't get in trouble for that. But yeah, no, I do think that one of the most, it's almost kind of moot, the whole conversation, because like one of the most human things is to try to not be human, and we're kind of talking about like we want to elevate ourselves to this place where we're not the same as everything, or we want to be like, this is inhuman. This is, like we otherize things that are part of us, like that's why for me, the IDF, it's important to humanize them too. Like they're coming back. It's really hard to do the things that they're being asked to do and come back not fucked up. But there may be horrible things being done that I don't agree with, but I obviously wouldn't want to kick it with them, but
no, it sounds worse than a Marine bar.
yeah,
No, but I mean, of course, we must have empathy for the makers of chains as much as we have for the imprisoned, because they are trapped in something too.
yeah,
Patriarchy is a trap, right? Men don't actually like doing masculine shit. That's why everybody freaks out about it so often. That's why, like, there's all this weird shit around it, like, because half of masculinity is fucking awful and lame, or like perceived masculinity within the contemporary structures that we have. A lot of it is like being oppressive and being shitty to people. I have kids, right? And like, I yell at them a lot, more than I should probably, but it's because it's impossible to wrangle these little bastards. But in the same right, I hate the yelly dad. I hate that I have to go through a day and go, get over here. Come on, we gotta go do this. Come on, what are you doing right now? Like, I don't being oppressive on any level, oppressive something inherently within the human that's engaging in it, right?
yeah.
my favorite story was one of my favorite stories is about like during chattel slavery, right? They're enslaving these millions and millions of Africans from all over the continent, and those people are my ancestors, right? And I have a lot of love for them and what they survived. Well, not what they survived, but their ability to survive it. And at the same time, in England, and this is like pre-industrial revolution, everything's made by hand. Everything's still made by humans. There's the people that are making the chains that are holding the slaves, in the United States, in the ships that they're being transported in on the coast of Africa, are children. They're children. We know this historically. Those factories, to make the millions of chains you'd have to enslave millions of people, right, are little kids
Mm,
working with hot iron, dinting away at it with tools and shaping them, that are making no money or next to no money and sacrificing their bodies and their childhoods to that. So like it doesn't, and that's always how I feel when I encounter kind of like a working a class authoritarian.
yeah,
When I'm dealing with a police officer, is like, you're sacrificing this part of yourself to a system that's so woefully cruel and broken
yeah,
that I inevitably have to look at you with more pity than scorn, because you think you may have some freedom, but what is the point of being free so you can work your fingers to ash on making change so that other people can't?
yeah,
What's the differential here? What we have a margin of difference here is so nominal. Um, it's almost imperceptible.
yeah,
So I get what you're saying about IDF soldiers, and I definitely wouldn't ever want to hang out with them. But I try to live, because I don't believe that peace is an inherent human state or a consistent one. But I do believe that empathy is an inherent human state, and I do believe that even if we cannot find peace, we can all see each other, and no matter how monstrous the deed, we can understand where that monstrosity may have developed.
yeah.
Um,
And I think it's
and
it's helpful to also understand like how powerful it is. I mean, I've just watched people. I'm still right after the election. I'm watching people say shit that is not true. You know, and I'm
Oh,
like, oh, I know where you're getting that. I like that's wild. You know, you're all getting the same information from the same place, and it's not true. Like
yeah,
it's demonstrably not true. It's been debunked and stuff like that. I'm not gonna say what it is so that people don't think that I'm a
yeah,
fucking crazy person.
yeah, yeah,
But then you're in that situation. A bunch of people have been made to believe something that is so fucking vile and insane, and if you counter that, you're the crazy person. You know,
yes.
which is crazy to me. So anyway, we've been going for like 120. Do you have any? I usually ask towards the end, like what if somebody has, if you have anything that I didn't get to ask you, or if you have a
No,
parting
yeah,
thought.
this is a great end it question. No, buy a local art, buy my art. I don't know. Call me, hang out. Like, go to art shows, do art things. Focus on the human capacity for growth and creativity, both internally and externally, forever and ever. Amen. And that is coming from
Yeah,
a definitely not religious person, but like, do that shit,
yeah,
and hold each other close. It's tough
yeah, for
times.
sure. No,
Tough
it's
things
tough
coming up,
times.
tough things behind
You
us.
know, it's tough times for someone everywhere all the time.
Yeah, yeah, but the most beautiful thing in the world, the most beautiful thing in the world, is being able to help somebody. It
Yeah.
it is the most enjoyable activity you can engage in. Way better than making art, although I'm too selfish to be a charity worker.
There goes the
Cool.
narcissism. All
There it
right,
is.
cool,
There it
man.
is. There it is.
A-
Thank you.
and what's your Instagram? What can we promote for you? Do you have a
I'm on
website?
Instagram. I don't have a website right now. I should get one again. I'm on Instagram at bread_n_circuses, because that is how you keep the masses placated, is with enough bread and
Bread and
circuses.
circus.
That's fucking 5,000 years old. They knew it
Yeah,
then. They know it now. Anyway, sorry. I could go on an entire thing. I'm at bread_n_circuses. on Instagram. I'm Brent Holmes on the Facebook. You can find me on LinkedIn if you really love social media with a heavy corporate twist. Um,
People that
no,
post on LinkedIn are fascinating to me, but
it's crazy. It's crazy. I'm like, why are we? This is weird, guys. This is like you want to be at work when you're at work doing not work thing. Anyway, again, we can digress for all of eternity. Yeah, I don't know. Check me out if any of you guys have like, if anybody listening has like a spare 15 to $20,000, I have a really cool projects I want to do. So if you hear this, that's
yeah.
all I want to say. Give me money so I can make weird shit.
Oh, you froze.
Oh, to give me money so I can make weird shit.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. I'm gonna and then what's it called? Thank you for checking out the show. If you enjoyed our conversation, please like and subscribe. Rate us 5 stars wherever it is that you listen. We have a Patreon, and I had it set up as 18 plus because I thought I needed to because of cursing, and apparently 18 plus on Patreon is for adult websites. So I managed to get that switch back. So you should have a much easier time finding our Patreon. It is what's my thesis at it is what's my thesis / patreon.com/. Just in case you get confused with those. And then, I'm working on some merch. Shirts should be coming in soon, and we will make those available through Patreon. I'm just going to start promoting it now so that in the future it works out. But yeah, thanks, and we'll be back next week with another guest and another topic that may or may not be art related. Thanks,
Thank
guys,
you, man.
for
Thank
what?
you for having me on. This was
Oh,
really
it's
fun.
a pleasure. Dude, thank you for explaining Vegas to me because it's a pretty interesting thing.